Send you live. Okay, you're live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission's monthly meeting that is being held virtually and in person today, Wednesday, June 16th, 2021. My name is Natalie Chrisman-Lazar, and I'm your chair. It is 5:34 p.m., and I call this meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Chair Chrisman-Lazar.
Present.
Vice Chair Coletta.
Present.
Commission members Abranovich. I don't think we have him on, and I don't think that Tammy Bossy has made it on. Commissioner Kuklik.
I'm on.
Oh,
Tammy Bossy's on.
very good. Commissioner Kuklik. Present. Commissioner Johnson.
Present.
And Commissioner Johnson, or Slasher, excuse me.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Do we have any public comments that we want to acknowledge at this time?
There was a public comment that came in about one of the agenda items. You may want to cover it during that period. It was
Okay.
not a general comment. It came in regarding the letter to the city council regarding support for the education about support for the code.
Great, thank you. I will go ahead and acknowledge it then in item 5. Item 1 is approval of regular meeting minutes for May 19th, 2021. Can we get a motion unless somebody has something that they'd like to discuss with respect to the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting. This is
So
Tammy.
Tammy moves to approve.
This is Steve Schlosser. I move to second.
Great, we have a motion.
And a second from Steve Schlosser.
That has been seconded. Can we go ahead and
Yes, take a vote.
take a vote?
Roll call. Chair Chrisman-Lazar,
Approved?
Vice Chair Coletta,
Approved.
Commission Member Tammy Bossy,
Approved.
Commission Member Walter Gluklik,
Approved.
Commission Member Ryan Johnson,
Yes.
and Commission Member Slasher.
Approved.
Okay, it passes.
Great, great. So agenda item 2 is an update on ASU's urban heat island study. Do we have Dr. Handula online?
Good evening, commissioners. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you again.
Thank you so much.
And
We look forward to your presentation.
thank you. And Sam, thank you for your help driving the slides. Our presentation will be relatively short this evening ahead of some more engagement that we are hopeful to have with you over the next few months as we'll talk about with Mr. Connor here over the next few slides. Sam, please proceed to the next slide. Just for a brief reminder for any commissioners who may have forgotten or for any members of the public who are joining us who have not been on over the past several months, Scottsdale is partnering with Arizona State University, and we're very appreciative of the partnership in a urban heat island mitigation study that has had several different facets, which we've talked about in previous meetings, which will ultimately be culminating at the end of this month with some specific recommendations for actions that the city could take to reduce temperatures in the city and better protect the public. Today, I wanted to provide just a couple of updates for you all about some activities that have happened over the past 2 months. They're outlined on the slide here. Sam, please go ahead to the next slide. If anyone was out on lucky days in Scottsdale in late May, you may have encountered this lovely garden cart with some meteorological instrumentation on it. This is Marty, and Marty was all over Scottsdale at the end of May collecting really detailed information about the thermal environment in these 4 different locations. And we've just finished data collection and processing here quite recently and are really just starting to analyze the data. But what Marty enables us to do is understand at great detail how the thermal environment varies from place to place and what the different factors are that are contributing to more and less comfortable conditions. As you all know from your day-to-day experience, You feel more comfortable in the shade on a day like today than you do in the sun. And that's not because the air temperature is different between those two places, but because the radiative environment is really different. And just to give you a sense of what the measurements from the Marty cart look like, Sam, if you go to the next slide, here's a comparison of two different variables. These are from our one of the transects in the waterfront area. The details here aren't super important. We just want to highlight these two different variables that are shown. The black line shows air temperature, measurements that were made, many measurements every second as we move the Marty cart through the waterfront area over the course of the noon hour, in this case in particular. And you can see that there were some modest variations in air temperature. That black line weaves up and down a little bit, but the variability is not particularly high. Another variable that we can calculate using the Marty cart is the mean radiant temperature. And this variable better reflects the conditions that the human body encounters as it moves through the city. And you can see that compared to air temperature, variability in mean radiant temperature is quite large. And what we'll be doing is comparing different points in the data where we see that the mean radiant temperature is low and high. We'll be connecting those to different features that we see in the urban landscape, which will ultimately help us craft recommendations for particular building geometries, building materials, tree placement, species selection, and so on. So we're really looking forward to sinking our teeth into these data that we've collected over the past few weeks, and much more to come in that regard. Sam, if you go ahead to the next slide, please. We've also collected a collection of a library of now hundreds of thermal images. As we were out with the Marty cart, we also had a thermal camera with us. And we have many different surface types, trees, people, water, you name it. We probably have a thermal photograph of it at this point. And I just wanted to highlight this one particular design strategy that we encountered in the waterfront area. This is this mixture of concrete tiles and artificial turf that we see pop up all across the region. And it was the AstroTurf, the artificial turf, in between these blocks that in fact were some of the hottest surfaces we observed anywhere in the whole measurement campaign. You can see that very clearly on that picture on the right. The green strips between the tiles are much hotter than the tiles were themselves. We thought that was interesting, and we will probably have a few lines in our recommendations about the performance of artificial turf relative even to other hard surfaces in the urban environment. And I'm sure that will invite some discussion and commentary from commission members either today or in a future meeting. If we can move along, Sam, please, to the next slide. We are not quite done with data collection. There's a little bit that will be happening over the next week, and then some ongoing efforts through the summer. Our helicopter flights will be taking additional thermal images are scheduled for next week. We'll be revisiting those 4 areas the Marty cart visited to get a larger scale view on how different surfaces are performing, finer scale view than the satellite data we all looked at several months ago, but really getting a nice overhead perspective on how different surfaces are performing. So in our 4 focus areas that you've heard about previously, pardon me, as well as measurements in the above the Indian Bend Wash area. And then we've identified some parks and schools that have artificial turf and other interesting features that are conveniently along the flight path. So we look forward to sharing that with you in the future. If you squint at the picture on the far right-hand side of the slide of Indian Bend Wash, you can see that there are some push pins in the map there. And those push pins represent the approximate locations where we've installed temperature and humidity sensors that will be collecting data over the course of this summer. A question that was brought up, I believe, both by the commission and by staff was about the relative contribution of the Indian Bend Wash to cooling surrounding neighborhoods. And we've designed a relatively simple field campaign to be able to get a first order of magnitude estimate of an answer to that question. And we appreciate the partnership with staff to make that happen. So thank you to staff. Sam, if we move ahead, please. As you've heard, our work is, we are charged with producing some recommendations for the city about strategies to reduce the urban heat island and keep the places where people are moving cool and safe. And the major categories of our recommendations, and we welcome your input on these, but the major categories of our recommendations seem to be falling into these 5 categories. One related to tree canopy, another related to reducing the area of dark asphalt and other hot surfaces. A third related to pedestrian cooling and shade amenities, including many of the wonderful transit stops that we encountered as we were out with the Marty cart. Recommendation related to waste heat and building efficiency, which we've heard commissioners prioritize in previous conversations. And then also recommendation about the inner workings of City Hall, thinking about which staff are engaged and sort of actively pursuing and thinking about heat mitigation strategies, what budget resources are allocated to urban heat island mitigation, and how the city is managing various data sets and information streams related to heat. If we move ahead, Sam, just to give a kind of teaser here about what the recommendations will look like. For each of those recommendations, we'll have some background information concerning the relevant science. We'll provide, where possible, data and examples from our field campaign. We'll be providing, again, where possible, examples, practices, and relevant policies from elsewhere. We'll certainly try to map connections between what we've seen on the ground and what we're seeing elsewhere to anything we've been able to find in Scottsdale's documents, ordinances, and plans. And again, we really appreciate staff's help to guide us into those documents to understand where to look, where the relevant language is for heat mitigation strategies. And then we might propose more specific action items within each of those broader areas and provide relevant resources. And we're really excited to share that with staff and with you over the coming weeks. Finally, just to remind you all on about the deliverables and a sense of the timeline ahead. We will have a technical report with an executive summary detailing all aspects of the project. We're also in the process of creating an online interactive story map that is intended to be the public-facing part of the project, which will have some questions posed to residents. If we have time, we'd love to float some of those past you or maybe hear about them in the future. And then there will be a data package that's sent to the city as well that has all of the sort of inner workings. I believe if Tim has joined us, he's able to speak to the schedule we imagine, particularly pertaining engagement with the commission moving forward. We do have a few more slides to think about community engagement questions, but I think this would be a good place to stop. I'll catch my breath. Maybe Tim wants to jump in and speak about the schedule. And of course, happy to field questions and discussions from the commissioners. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Yes, let me just go through a timeline so you can understand where we're going to hopefully end up. Of course, tonight we're presenting you with just the updates of what's going on. On the 30th, David's team is going to turn over to staff the final deliverable plan in a draft format. Staff will then have about approximately 1 month through the month of July to review that and give comments back to ASU. We'll come in the July meeting on July 21st here at the SEAC, and will do a brief presentation of what we received and then give you all access to those documents. I'm hoping to have you all provide comments in advance of our August meeting, if possible, approximately a week in advance, so that I can get those written down and share those with David as well, so they can do some reactive work on that. Basically, the next trick will be is that we have a sustainable steering committee. They're meeting on August the 5th. We're asking David's group to come in and provide that presentation to them before they come into this group, which again will be on August the 17th or 18th, excuse me. Finally, we're going to be working after we've received your comments on August the 18th to pull the final documents together and go to City Council on a meeting that will be an informational item, no action, but just giving them a chance to comment and provide their input on it on probably the mid-September range. So that's where we're hoping to be. This was intended to be a one-year contract. We did not get started until November on this contract. So we're still in alignment, I think, with what our intent was. Thank you.
We have a question from Walter.
Yeah, hi. I love the presentation. That was great. I've gotten a little bit more excited about the kind of the project as it's evolved. Originally, I would have wished we would have focused on energy, clean energy or distributive energy within the city, but that's I've started to get my head wrapped around this. One question that I have for Doctor is, one thing that would be interesting to see as part of this, and I know it might be outside of the scope, but something that'd be good for you guys to hypothesize around as you do this is, what are the economic benefits and what are the economic risks related to these actions, right? And if you go back a few slides, Sam, where it's talking about heat, adding to tree canopy or stuff like that, it'd be interesting. I'll take, for example, some of my thoughts is, a lot of Scottsdale's economic value is driven through tourism, right? So tourism is higher in cool months than it is in warm months, right? So if it gets too hot, too long, we're going to be affected economically. It'd be great as you're considering making these presentations and pitches to the city, you have some type of either economic loss or benefit of these actions. And I'll leave it at that, or feel free to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I couldn't agree more. And I think this has been a real shortcoming of the urban climate and environmental health community as long as I've been involved in the work, in that we don't do a very good job of making arguments oriented around dollars, despite claiming that we are aware that people really care about dollars and that dollars are motivating. To share some good news with you, the Nature Conservancy in Arizona has
David, we lost your mic.
Hey there, I have just rejoined. Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Tim?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, not sure what happened there. Anyway, for the commissioner, the bit of good news, the Nature Conservancy over the past year has commissioned a consultant to help develop an economic impact assessment for heat issues, primarily focused on Phoenix, but part of the analysis is applicable countywide. And they are nearing the completion of that project. So we will have some initial estimates of some of the economic consequences of some parts of the heat story. For example, they've done a lot of work analyzing economic impacts of morbidity and mortality associated with heat, which doesn't speak to the tourism angle, which is really important to contemplate as well. So some data are coming. We are certainly happy to continue thinking about how to do that with you. We couldn't agree more that it's an important topic to think about for Scottsdale and the region. And it also happens to be quite interesting scientifically to try to make that measurement, figure out how to collect the right data and analyze it that gives you that answer that you're looking for. So thank you for the comment.
Yeah, and the only other suggestion I'll make is, even if you start and you get it wrong with your estimates initially, even starting it as part of this is a great first step, right? So don't feel afraid to fail, is my opinion, because like you said, the industry demands it. We know that they want it, and certain aspects of sustainability are very easy. Heat island effect is very difficult to do, but if we don't start to try to quantify the economics or return on investments for every tree that Scottsdale plants, it's going to get $50 over the next 10 years or whatever. We can't figure, you're not going to get people to buy in 100%. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Completely agree. And I know many of my colleagues here at ASU feel equally passionate about this topic.
Dr. Handula, I have one more comment, and it's just really a bigger picture comment. I am excited about the results associated with the green belt. One of the big topics that I know we've had discussions on associated with the general plan is open space. I know that it's very near and dear to a lot of residents, and any attempt to acknowledge that in your documentation and what impacts you can see would be helpful in terms of trying to respond to some of those concerns. I think that we do a great job at managing open space. We could do better, and I know that anything that you can offer on that premise, either just our parks and recs as well as, of course, our wonderful preserve. That is something to at least acknowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Understood and noted.
Does anyone else have any comments for Dr. Handula? Did you want to go over your possible community
Yeah, if I
engagement
may, and I
questions?
apologize, Chairperson Lazar. Sorry, in the past when we were all on Zoom, it was easy to tell who was speaking, but now it's not quite as difficult and without the camera feed. So I apologize. Thank you, Chairperson Lazar. Yes, if we might go through these for just a couple of moments, I know it's a busy agenda, but with staff, we agree with staff that this online story map that we'll be creating will be a good opportunity for the city to directly receive feedback from residents on issues related to urban heat. And we don't need to have a lengthy discussion about this today, but I'd like to share a couple of questions that we have either asked on previous surveys, in previous community workshops, previous online forums, and or created originally for this project, just to find out what types of information from residents would, that you all think would be helpful to guide what the city is doing, whether it's to have that perspective from residents that really supports particular initiatives, or to learn from residents where we are seeing successes or perhaps shortcomings in the community. So here are some of the questions that we have contemplated, including in the story map, and maybe there are one or two of them that really jump out at you all as exciting or not. How important do you think it is for the city to take action to reduce urban heat? How good of a job is Scottsdale doing at reducing urban heat? Sam, please scroll ahead here. We'll go through these pretty quickly, just sort of in a lightning round. How important do you think it is for the city to create more cool and comfortable spaces for pedestrians in the summer? How good of a job is the city doing at that particular task? Go ahead, Sam. Satisfaction and dissatisfaction with various features in Scottsdale. You can see a list there on the left. Heat mitigation strategies that the city's considering, asking residents to rank those. Thinking about if Scottsdale was hotter or cooler than other cities. We can also ask the same question at the neighborhood scale, which is quite interesting, has been in previous studies. We often ask if folks have experienced symptoms of heat illness to get a first sense of their heat experience. And of course, there are a lot of other directions we could go here in the online story map, or simply leave an open-ended text field that asks residents to provide their thoughts about heat in Scottsdale. So we'll, at your guidance, Chair Chrisman Lazar, maybe we could hear a couple of reactions to possible questions to include in the story map, or maybe table this item for discussion later in the summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments on the questions?
This is Commissioner Kukulik. The only addition I would make is, again, asking, if you're asking questions about which industries or solutions for heat mitigation that they prefer, I'd maybe ask a general question around whether they think heat mitigation has a positive impact on Scottsdale's economy.
Thank you.
In terms of what the vision is for this, I guess this is directed towards staff. Are you guys thinking about putting this up on the website in advance of further discussions about the work that ASU is doing?
When it's concluded and the council has seen it, I think we'll be placing it up on the web. We'll put it on the Sustainable Scottsdale website, and then we'll be able to also break it into packages. We'll have this executive summary broken out, the technical report broken out, any analysis that they're doing broken out into a separate document. And then of course the story map is going to be a separate link as well. So yes, we are planning to do that. We haven't yet discussed how we're going to retrieve the data from the survey, but I'm sure that David has a good idea of how to do that. So
great, thank you. If there are no further comments, thank you so much, Dr. Handula. We really appreciate your work, and it's it's something that I'm definitely very interested in. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to participate, and we really appreciate the partnership with staff and their guidance, and hope everybody is able to stay cool this week and into the summer.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, we have a discussion with Ms. Gretchen Baumgardner with Water Resources. She's going to talk to us a little bit about the Colorado River shortage, drought status, and conservation efforts.
Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. It's a decent length of a PowerPoint. I have to apologize for that, but I'm sure you guys have all read in the news. So this is a lot of really great timely information. So I'll be as thorough but concise as possible. Okay. So with that, tonight I'm going to talk about just briefly our water resource portfolio, the Colorado River shortage, our conservation programs, and then some of our new initiatives. And at the end, I'll be asking for some follow-up and some thoughts and recommendations on how we can message and campaign this. So let's dive into what Scottsdale water demand is and the customer makeup of that demand. This is Scottsdale Water in a nutshell. Our customer account breakdown, when looked at just the number of accounts, is overwhelmingly residential at 88% of the accounts being residential. And that's an important point to consider when talking about efforts and campaigns to communicate shortage conditions and responses and conservation programs, but also how complex that communication effort needs to be. We also need to consider how much of these customer classes make up for the percentage of water that we deliver. It's not on here, but for example, let's talk about just our commercial customer class. Although they make up about 6% of our total account holders, they make up about 15% of the water delivered. So a portion of those customers, those commercial customers, have a very complex business to run, and they need complex resources to help them efficiently use water and reduce their water footprint. So I'm gonna go through this, and I just want to caveat that when we talk about the water industry, we talk about 2 units, and one is acre feet, which is it's what it sounds like, 1 acre of water a foot deep, and 1 acre foot is enough to supply 1 Scottsdale family of 4 for a year. Next slide. So this slide is the breakdown of the type of water delivered to all of our customers to satisfy total demand. And this graphic represents the supply delivered for the calendar year 2020, last year. This includes both potable for irrigation, non-potable and potable for irrigation purposes. And you'll see that while we have a lot of components to our supply, which is a really great thing to have diversification of portfolio, us as Scottsdale, the majority of our supply is overwhelmingly CEP allocation. So let's talk about the Colorado River and the laws that govern the shortage on the system. Next slide. The Colorado River Basin states negotiated and created the 2007 interim guidelines to dictate when a shortage is declared and by how much. And several years ago, it became apparent to all the partners and the states involved that the guidelines were not enough. And the basin states came together and negotiated an overlaying set of stipulations, and Scottsdale was one of those folks at the table. So in 2019, the Drought Contingency Plan was passed, which increased the amount of water cuts that were taken at each tier shortage. The goal of the DCP was not to prevent a shortage, but rather to reduce the risk of catastrophic cuts. And naming one of the wonderful things that came out of this conversation and agreement is that California agreed to take cuts, which was not a stipulation of the 2007 guidelines. Next slide. So this graphic is a graphic that shows that the declarations are made when the Lake Mead reaches certain lake levels, which this graphic represents. The DCP created a tier 0, which wasn't in the 2007 guidelines, which we are currently in. So the next level would be a tier 1, which would be declared by the Bureau of Reclamation in their August 24-month study projections for the following January 1. With each progressive tier amount reduction increases, as seen from the increasing bubbles on the state graphic there on the right. And Arizona, along with the other basin states, have been working hard to curtail this potential, but the system is over allocated, and with the prolonged drought, at this point in the drought, it's almost certain that this August there'll be a declaration for a 2022 shortage of a tier 1. So next slide. Like I said, this is probably all obvious to every single one of you on this call, as it's been in the news almost daily, and that's going to continue to be so. Next slide. So let's first understand what's been driving this. The desert Southwest has been experiencing over 20 years of dry conditions and reduced precipitation. It's a historical drought. It's the driest 22 years on record. And beyond an abnormal period of dryness, typically what we would think of a drought, we're also seeing continued evidence that a warming climate is driving the process called aridification, which is a trend of warming and dryness that may not be temporary. And the last component of decline in the system is what's called the structural deficit. More water is allocated to the water users than nature provides, even in years of high flow. These and all of these causes contribute to decline in the reservoir systems, leaving the Colorado River vulnerable and the supplies available to Arizona, a junior priority holder, more sensitive to changing hydrologic conditions. So what are the projections for lake levels in the system? Next slide. Oh, I animated this slide. Oh, is this a PowerPoint? Oh. Okay, well, I'm just going to talk from it because you should be able to see the projections. But basically what the projections are, this is a 24-month study that the Bureau put out back in May. And it's projecting that the lake levels in January 1 of 2022 will be well below the 1075 trigger of a tier 1. They're projected to be at 1066. So even the wettest hydrology, and so this goes through the wettest hydrology, most probable, and the driest hydrology. All three of those scenarios are predicting that we'll be in a tier 1 in 2022 and potentially a tier 2 in 2023. So what does this mean for Scottsdale? Next slide. So this is a wonderful, pretty, colorful slide. CEP water rights are a matter of what's called a priority. There's a priority system to the right that we all hold, as is surface water in the West. So the figure on the right is what's called the CEP priority stack. Different pools of water rights have different priorities. So those holders of waters on the top of the stack have junior priority and are cut first. And those increase in senior priority as you progress to the bottom of the stack. Shortage cuts happen from top to bottom. In a tier 1 shortage, Arizona's CEP supply is reduced by 512,000 acre feet. Now, it's important to know that the volume includes cuts that Arizona has already been taking for years. Remember, we're currently in a tier 0 and we have been for 2 years. So the leaving of water behind in Lake Mead, we have been leaving water behind in Lake Mead, but the net change for tier 1 in 2022 will be closer to 300,000 acre feet. This shortage tier 1 eliminates that top other excess pool and then agriculture priority pool. So ag users in Pinal and southern parts of Maricopa County. And there's a projected cut for about 60%, what's called the NIA priority supply. You can see from the colored table there on the left is a representation of the different rights that Scottsdale holds of CEP water. In a tier 1, the NI pool will have the most drastic cuts from it. And Scottsdale would have a small, would be affected in a small portion of our CEP supply, as our CAP supply is about 4% NIA, or 4% of it is NIA water. So 60% of 4%. The important concept that needs to be considered here is that shortage declaration could and would last more than just 1 year. It's uncertain at the length of time that a shortage will last, and therefore mindfulness is how we message our supplies, and efforts around conservation is incredibly important. So before I dive into our conservation programs, let's quickly go over the approximate percentage quantifications of each tier reduction that could be felt by Scottsdale. Next slide. This table came out of the drought management plan. I changed it to percentages to kind of help us more conceptual level. So this table is from the drought management plan, and the table demonstrates the relationship with our drought management plan stages with the Lake Mead elevations and the CP water tiers and the potential percent reductions that could be felt by Scottsdale. As you can see from the table, percent reductions to our CP supply in the early stages are not very significant. However, heightened awareness and conservation tools are important for long-term resiliency. Next slide. We need to understand that Scottsdale has, and the rest of the state, but Scottsdale has been long planning for this situation, and we have invested millions of dollars in infrastructure, water supplies, and our conservation programs. And we are positioned well to provide supply in the face of shortage. And at the same time, it's everyone's responsibility to use water efficiently and to be the best stewards of our environment. The Conservation Office has many tools and programs available to assist residents in the effort to be, and we are adding more programs. So let's talk about all of the programs we have and then the new ones that we are currently working through. So next slide. Conservation will play a significant role moving forward in education and outreach effort with the shortage. Some of the key areas to promote and highlight on the ongoing conservation efforts includes extensive history of conservation in Arizona and in Scottsdale, and the resources available to assist residents and commercial customers, and the critical role of efficient water use will play with all of us. We need to ensure that people understand that conservation matters and it does make the difference, and that using water efficiently is up to all of us, and we all play a part. After all, we live in the desert because we understand that water conservation is necessary, not temporary. Next slide. Scottsdale has one of the most robust and diverse programs that offer in the Valley. We have a number of incentive rebates, workshops, commercial audit programs, commercial customer water portal, an HOA water budget program, and residential outdoor water efficiency checks. And I'll go through all of those in a little detail. One of the things when we talk to customers, it's always interesting to me that most people are actually surprised by this. When we talk to our residents and all across Arizona, most people don't realize that 70%, 65 to 70% of our water usage as a homeowner is used outside. So when we can see water savings on a larger scale and making changes, efficiency outside and on turf and water needs are one of our priorities in the Conservation Office. Next slide. We in Scottsdale Water are, and we should all be very proud, our rebate program is actually one of the robust of all the Valley cities. We have an extensive rebate program from a number of installation rebates to removal rebates that we have here on the slide. Next slide. Our outdoor water efficiency check program has been shown to save both water and also improve customer satisfaction. We have staff that goes out and talks to residents. And a lot of times it leads to the homeowners' awareness of actually how much water they do use and how much water they need to use. And it could lead to other rebate programs and changing of some of their installations of their irrigation usage. So this has been a really popular program, and it's shown to save water. Next slide. We have twice a year, we offer a suite of water workshops to assist educate residents on conservation efficiency programs. Both many of them are outside the home. You could see here irrigation and maintenance and low water plant use. And so we will be offering those. Actually, we offered those in April, and we'll be offering them again in October. Next slide. The commercial audit program was created a few years ago, and we've been growing this. This is actually a really exciting program. We'll go out to businesses and audit how they use their water. And this program is available to any business in Scottsdale. What we'd like to communicate to folks and what we're going to need to is over the past 2 years, we've been really focusing on city facilities. And this last fiscal year, because of COVID, we didn't have the opportunity to go into a lot of commercial offices. So we heightened our concentration on city facilities. And over this last fiscal year, we did 22 city facilities. And we're currently disseminating the data that's coming from those. And we'll work closely with facility management to find options to implement water savings techniques and technology within our own city facilities. Next slide. So our WaterSmart portal is one of our newer programs. It's our WaterSmart customer portal, and this program was launched just this year. It's available to all customers to use through Scottsdale Utility Payment Portal. The tool will be incredibly beneficial as we develop what's called our Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project, which is an acronym we call AMI. Now, an AMI meter is capable of collecting hourly water use data. This data will be available to the customers through the portal and can be used to find potential leaks and understand irrigation watering practices. This is incredibly important because when you have a conversation with customers, the majority of them don't understand how they use water, sometimes on a monthly basis, but definitely not necessarily on a daily basis. So this is a wonderful tool to put water management inside the customer's hands. So we're currently working on increasing our AMI meter capability throughout Scottsdale. And this is a several year undertaking. And currently we have about 10 to 20% of customers that have an AMI capable meter. Next slide. Our HOA program is also one of our newer programs. This program takes GIS and LiDAR data and is able to very sophisticatedly and accurately determine a water budget for an HOA. So it helps them hone in on exactly the appropriate and efficient amount of water that they use. You'd be surprised at outdoor irrigation that there's a lot of organizations that are unaware of overwatering practices. So next slide. With that program, we're coupling that with a new pilot program this year. And this is called our Waterfluence Program. And we're piloting it to see how well it works with our HOA budget program. And what this is you can see the graphic there. A lot of other cities have started to use this. Gilbert's uses extensively, Mesa's use this, and Chandler's also doing a pilot, where this is a web-based service where we take the budget we've developed for them and we input it into this web base, and their irrigation companies get notifications on when they have a deviation from their actual water usage to the budget, so they can get notifications if they're overwatering. And it's shown to reduce water waste by up to 50%. So with that, moving forward, we in Scottsdale Water and the City of Scottsdale will continue to collaborate to ensure regional messaging efforts remain coordinated with the changing conditions and prepare for August and beyond. And it's important to strike the right balance between, we have been preparing for this, but we also know that these are unprecedented times and we are not taking this lightly, and we all need to continue to do everything we can to conserve and be as efficiently as we can with water. We need to continue to identify and create supportive materials, FAQs, fact sheets, and talking points, and increase attention and concerns that come with customer questions and calls, and continue to collaborate. Is it going to be vital as we head into the shortage and beyond? So what we're looking from the commission is, first of all, an understanding of our robust programs, but then also we're currently underway of trying to find ways to build that messaging program and get the word out, and how we can communicate that to our customers. So we're looking for recommendations from the commission of how to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. I really appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions or comments or input for Gretchen?
This is Commissioner Steve Schlosser. Just how would you know if you had one of these AMI meters? You said about 20% of the customer base has it, but how do they know, or how would I know if I had one?
So we're working on developing a website for an FAQ website for WaterSmart. It actually should be up here in a couple weeks, and it will have a graphic on it who has AMI and who doesn't. You can also log into your utility billing account, and there will be a little WaterSmart button there. And you can go to it and it'll be obvious whether or not there's hourly data or if there's just monthly data.
Okay, thank you.
Walter, I think you have a question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great presentation. I had a couple of questions and comments. The first one was regarding some of the statistics that you had shown regarding the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I think I captured, and correct these aren't, we don't have to be exactly correct with my numbers, but I just want to make sure I understood this. So in the next 2 to 3 years, we're forecasted to be in tier 3. Is that correct, I guess?
There's a potential to be in tier 2. There's not
tier 2. Okay, tier 2.
Tier
Yeah.
2.
Oh yeah. And that's the current forecast for 2023, right? I think.
It's a potential. It's not 100%.
Yeah, that's the forecast as of today, right? It's what it is, right? That's what you showed on the slide. Okay.
Yep. That's what the Bureau says.
Okay. And then in tier 2, Scottsdale loses 9% of its cap water.
So there's 2 tier 2s, which is very confusing. There's a 2A and a 2B, and it's 2A, which is at 1050. And it loses. And the percentages are estimates. So what you need to,
I'm just going off of what, yeah. Can you bring that back up, Sam, just so we can see that? Could you?
4% in a 2A.
4, okay. And then 2B, and is the forecast differentiated between whether the 2023 is 2A or 2B? Down one. Sorry, Sam. Down one more. Sorry, down the other direction. Oh, no, the other. There we go. Okay.
It depends on which hydrology.
Okay. But in
Yeah.
2023, we could be at a 9% cut at the cap. That's a medium forecast today.
There's a small probability, but there is a probability.
Well, I guess, is that the extreme or is that the average?
Yeah,
or most likely?
that's the red line, which is that's the extreme. That's
Okay.
the driest hydrology that, as the Bureau puts out right
Okay.
now.
And then around 75% of our water comes from cap.
70 to 75%. Correct.
Yeah. So in the next 2 years, there's a bad case scenario of us losing 6 to 7% of our water.
That sounds about right. Now, what we need to know about that is we have not completely grown into our CAP supply. Although we deliver last calendar year, we delivered about 75% to our customers' CAP supply. We have an allocation of our CAP supply that we don't deliver to our customers, and we recharge that in local and regional aquifers to save as a savings account. So a lot of that cut would be from our CAP supply that we're putting in our savings account.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems like a short timeline for a potential huge reduction in our water and available usage. And again, as we develop, I guess my question is, as we develop conservation programs, how do we determine the economic value for every gallon of water saved? I worked directly with Southern Nevada Water Authority years back around conservation programs, and they had basically a calculator that for every dollar, if I gave somebody $50 to replace an old toilet, that was worth it from an economic perspective. I assume we have something similar.
We do have something similar, and I have. Oh, and it looks like Brian's. He is probably better versed to step in than me, but we do have something similar.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair and Commission. This is Brian Biesmeyer, Water Resources Executive Director, and I was on here just in case there were some questions as this. And what Gretchen's staff does every year is they do exactly as the Commissioner stated. They give me $1 per gallon savings for each of our conservation measures, and we rate those because obviously we can't always do all the measures in front of us, but we want to do the ones that have economic value and make our investment worthwhile in the dollars and gallons saved.
Thank you so much. I had one comment and actually two comments, sorry. The first was, it was in reference to Southern Nevada Water Authority. At our recent Arizona Forward Summit that we were able to participate in, one of the things that I thought was an interesting perspective, and I think it's very applicable to us, was the concept in their strategy and how they communicate to residents, the concept of lost water. And because Scottsdale does take the water that we of course flush and send it to the treatment facility, and it actually gets re-injected, or at least a good portion of that, or it gets replaced and used in other ways. The premise of taking water out of our system is that we lose it. And I think that premise is a good way to communicate how we want to discuss things like how we utilize this very large percentage in our lawns. That is lost water as soon as we do that. And so again, being able to tell the story a little bit more effectively than just, hey, you're losing a lot of water, or you used a lot of water in your lawn landscaping. what we're doing every time we go out and we utilize very intensive lawn watering and, various outside environments, that water is no longer available to us for banking or for reuse or replacing other resources. So again, I think telling the story is very important. And I think that it's interesting because Southern Nevada Water does the same kind of thing. They actually treat their water and put it back into one of the lakes. Is it Lake Mead?
Yeah.
And so they have this as a part of their messaging campaign. And I just thought that was an interesting way to talk to people about it. And I think we have a lot of educated residents that I think it might resonate with, because we've spent this money in this reuse system. I think it's a useful thing to be able to talk about. My only other comment was we do have two members on our commission that identified this as something that they were passionate about. Tammy Bossy is very passionate about water conservation and water efficiency. And so I would definitely encourage you all to reach out to her on that matter. And I know that Walter, as he indicated here, has identified and raised his hand as someone who is very interested in our drought management planning. So, as you look at ways to reach out and involve those two individuals, I would definitely say, please champion them and involve them as much as you can.
And this is Commissioner Kukulik. The only other comment or idea that I'd have around incentives, and I think it will be timely, or something that Anthony will be talking about again, as well as building codes, right? So by incentivizing, one of the things I had partnered with Southern Nevada on is new construction efficiencies, right? Getting builders to put in measures that are above minimum code can be often cheaper, one of the cheapest forms of conservation. And I would echo Chairman Lazar's comments about outdoor water usage. One thing that Southern Nevada did well, or I think probably best in the country, was they were very aggressive around turf removal. Because as she had pointed out, you use it on turf and it's not getting recharged. So thank you. Great presentation.
Chair Lazar, you have three people with hands up. Ryan Johnson has been waiting patiently. Brian Biesenmeyer is also asking to speak. And additionally, Tammy Bossy. And I don't know if you can see those raised hands when you're live. So just thought I'd bring that to your attention.
Thank you so much. No, I cannot see hands. So please do. I think that Mr. Brown will try to alert me in the future. Thank you. So if we have, go ahead. I think we have. Yes, thank you.
Well, this is Ryan Johnson. I apologize. My Wi-Fi is a bit shaky where I am, but Brian Biesmeyer had his hand up. So Brian, let me defer my time to you, because I think you had a comment to make.
No, I apologize. I had my hand up the first time to answer on the question of dollar value. My apology for not getting it down.
Okay, so I want to go back to the slide that had the percentages on it, Walter, and I got a really technical question, but the one that was up a minute ago about the 3% and then the 4%. And my question is, when we go from one tier to the next, so we go, let's say we're at a hypothetical 100 and we reduce by 3%. Now we're at 97. Does the next 4% come from the 100? So is it an additional 1%, or is it an additional 4% after we've reduced by 3%? If I'm making that clear.
You are making it clear. It's an additional 1%.
Okay. So if we get to a tier 2A, it's only an additional 1% after the first 3%. I mean,
Correct.
I hate to say it, but we're in a crisis here, a drought crisis. 3 and 4% doesn't feel that much of a crisis. I mean, I'm just thinking about the messaging for the community and the residents. That just doesn't feel like much of a crisis to me. If we're only asking, or if we're only going to be punished by 3 or 4%. And Nevada was mentioned here. Let me just mention as well. I think I saw in the news that the state of Nevada just passed a law in the last week or so banning what they're calling what is it, non-functional
Ornamental turf.
Non-functional turf, yeah, and it's going to
ornamental
largely affect Southern Nevada. But an article that I read said up to 30% of the grass in the Las Vegas area might be affected by this ban on non-functional grass. Anyway, thank you.
Tammy, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Chair Christmas Lazar. I guess I'll piggyback on what you're talking about telling the story, and also what Commissioner Johnson was mentioning about the messaging. Well, how do we best help, and what is happening? What are we doing within the city related to the practical story of this? Like, how does this affect us in our daily lives? And what are the, how do we message in the most practical way what people can do? Because I think so often with any of these environmental issues, it's like, oh, the issue's just so large, I don't know what to do. And I know we have got some good water sense. We have lots of things posted in various places, but do we think we get traction very well with our residents on what we could be doing? And I guess the second question is, how do we balance the benefit of what, like trees and plants and what they do for the air versus how much water they take? And again, all of that sort of rolls into our policy thinking related to how do we encourage and maybe add policies related to water use reduction in a way that the average person can be clear on. Is that and I guess that would be a question for Mr. Biesmeyer and for Gretchen and anyone else who wanted to add into that.
So I think it's going to be a suite of things. I think it's complex to reach folks. They're bombarded with so much content. And so we're going to have to do, and that's what we're working through right now. We'll use our normal regular bill inserts, but we're going to add some social media campaign to it. And we'll add some newsletters, and the Water Smart portal will be a big component of it as we grow into our AMIs. There's notifications there. And I think it'll be a collaborative effort across not just the water division, but across the entire city to find ways to message it. And Tammy, you're right. There's a balance between the environment and the heat island mitigation and water. And all of it's going to be about trying to be as efficient as we can, because we do have to balance all of those things. But I do see two hands raised.
Brian, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to leverage off of that, and because I know Gretchen's been working with our new PIO, Valerie Schneider, and Valerie's so she hit the ground running here just a couple months ago, and so we've been really pushing her to get this messaging going and move out. And as Commissioner Bossy said, that it's a challenge for us to reach out. We're going to put our campaign together, and then we'll certainly check back with the commission on that, because we'd certainly like advice and ideas on how we reach people and if we're doing that well. So things will be moving out all through this summer. We also have with the budget that was passed, we have another conservation specialist coming on to help Gretchen's staff as we ramp up our messaging. So I just say, stand by in the next several months. I think we're going to be ramping that up, and then we'll be checking back for advice on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve has his hand up.
This is Commissioner Schlosser, and I want to raise the unpalatable option, and that is currently the price tiers for water in the city of Scottsdale are really out of context with the actual scarcity of the product. And I think if you want to have messaging that resonates with people, maybe don't change the first tier, but subsequent tiers, if you raised the price per 1,000 gallons by quite a bit, you will get people's attention to then listen to the messaging that you have and make appropriate changes. I mean, right now, we're asking people to be considerate of their neighbors and themselves and be altruistic about saving water. Whereas, I'm not going to go down the political nightmare, but people don't seem to be altruistic about a lot of things, including public health. And so if there's a financial impact for not doing something, they'll be much more inclined to listen to the arguments and to listen to the messaging than there is if, well, it can't be that important. I still pay the same $1.35 per 1,000 gallons for the first 5,000 gallons and $2.90 for the next 12,000 gallons and so forth, $1.65 for the next 12,000 gallons. And if all of a sudden it became $5 for the next 12,000 gallons per 1,000 gallons, you get a lot more attention in a hurry. So I know that's not an option, I mean, everybody wants to use the carrot, but sometimes I think using the stick can be just as effective. And I yield to Commissioner Bossi, who has her hand up.
Thank you. Actually, Tony's had his hand up for a while as well. So I'm sorry, we'll go back to
Go to Tony.
Thank you, Natalie. My question or comment is, I think awareness and getting the word out is great, but maybe it's a two-pronged question. Is there a point where we finally say that awareness can only go so far, and that city or staff or water department says, you know what, we need to put our foot down. We need to do something more, because there's a lot of calls, a lot of crying out there for, we're in a drought. There's a lot of things going on. And I think awareness is great. All the metering is great. But I mean, just from what we're seeing and what we're hearing, that does not seem to be doing enough. I guess my question or comment is we hear over and over, and this is before my time, that the city of Scottsdale was a leader in whatever the case may have been, from energy to whatever. I want to see us be a leader again and taking whatever steps are necessary to help curb this, at least doing our fair share. And just dovetailing on what Walter said and Commissioner Johnson said about some of these things just don't seem to be enough. And maybe that's part of your package or what you've got together that we either we're not seeing or we aren't hearing, and you've got other plans to do things from a much more extreme nature. But I think at some point, when we're waiting weeks and months and seeing what feedback we get, I'd rather see us being more extreme about doing things than just kind of waiting and seeing the results we get. Thank you.
Brian, in response to both Tony's and Steve's comment, I think that you probably have your hand up.
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair. Yes, I do. And well, I know Gretchen's briefed our drought management plan, and with that, as those tiers ratchet up, so do other things such as restrictions on water consumption. So in that, as each stage goes in, the first stage for tier 1 is really communications and the city trying to set the example. But as we get into stage 2, and particularly 2B, then many more options come open to us in our drought management plan, including restrictions on folks. So we know things are hitting the news, and it has been very dry, but we are not even at this point even in a tier 1. We want to take the proactive approach and get things moving, but we do have responses as we look at our drought management plan in the upper tiers to do things that are a little more drastic. We also take a look every year at our tiers, and I agree with Commissioner Schlosser that that's definitely a thing to look at. And we have, because traditionally we have not raised the tier 1. I think we raised it 5 cents in my 9 years here. We typically have been raising those upper rates, but I would also say that the thing that we look at next in doing that is actually condensing those tier levels. And we just had some discussions today on the next round when we go council of compressing those tiers. So the time between, going from 5,000 to 12,000, and the next one up is I believe around 30,000. If we compress those, it does exactly as the commissioner said. That also drives home a point on the cost of your water. And so we'll be looking at those, and we continually do. Thank you.
And this is Commissioner Kukulik. And if you do that in combination with increased incentives for turf removal, it ends up being a benefit. At least when I've seen the water districts do this, you raise those upper tier levels and then you raise the incentive levels for turf removal. It ends up being a PR win in many senses. So.
Thanks for that. Tammy's been very patient. Tammy, you had a comment as well.
Thank you, Chair. Kind of, again, following up on Commissioner Schlosser's points about the tier rates and Mr. Biesmeyer's responses. So what can we do with increased with that increased income if we did increase the rate? Not that that's the reason for it. Obviously it would have a public policy focus on the cost and the return. But I mean, what would we do if our rates were higher? Obviously, first off, we hope it wouldn't necessarily be a whole lot more income because it means people are using less water. But it does seem, at least to some degree, there'd be maybe some reinvestment if our rates were a little higher. And has anybody ever studied that? And then I had the question about, are we partnering with like nonprofits and schools and businesses on getting this messaging out, and how can we be helpful with that? And then I was curious how many people use our rebates. Is that compared to our goals of what people use our rebates for these water efficiency improvements? 3 different questions.
Thanks, Tammy. Brian, you have your hand up.
Yes, let me try, and I think Gretchen might be able to answer some of those better than I. But I think the first one was teaming up with nonprofits and such, and I think that's a great idea. We need to expand that thought. Actually, I take it back. The first one was you asked Commissioner Bossi was about if we up the rates, what do we do with that extra revenue? Yes, I would propose we throw that back into our rebates. If we make the first thing we factor though is if we use less water, we have a lot of fixed costs that we still have to pay. So it's an analysis we go through every year about what those rate impacts are, and if we change the tiers and we compress that, we analyze that. But I would propose, as was stated here, that you compress those rates a little bit and you force people to fill that on their budget, and then you give them the incentive of, hey, if you take out your turf, you do the xeriscape, all of a sudden it becomes much more attractive to them. And as far as the third one, and I apologize, Commissioner, I think that was more appropriate for Gretchen to answer that one.
The rebates, I'm just curious how many people, how are we doing with our goals for people using rebates versus people actually using them? Are they very well utilized?
They are very well utilized. And actually, Brian and I have had some conversations about looking at next fiscal year is upping those amounts to even make them a little more attractive, especially the turf removals. So they are utilized, and we do have some success. Although this last COVID year, they dipped down a little bit because of COVID, but we have a historical success rate of other rebates. But as a part of this whole campaign, we will be revisiting them and the dollar amounts associated with them.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you both. I appreciate your time. Does anyone have any final comments or questions? Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate your participation and all the useful information. We would enjoy hearing any other updates. I mean, I think, as you indicated, there's maybe a year-end review where you do evaluate, the premise of things that are working and things that aren't working so well. And maybe that's an opportunity to come and speak with us a little bit further about it. So I would definitely invite you to come and share in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I would absolutely enjoy that.
Great. Our next item on our agenda is a presentation by our own Mr. Stockwell. He will be speaking with us about the new Sustainability Program Manager.
All right, Chair and members of the commission, I have a 34 slide present. No, I don't. I'm just here to talk to you briefly about the background and the process that we went through to develop a job description for a new position here at the City of Scottsdale, an Environmental Sustainability Program Manager. Let me just give a little bit of the background and then not yet, Sam, I'll let you know. So we can just stay on the main slide for now. So as you know, the commission has talked about adding an additional staff person to lead our environmental sustainability efforts. We have evaluated where that position might be in the organization, and we feel that a mid-level staff person that's high functioning, able to focus on project management to move initiatives and strategies forward is the position that we need at this point. So what we did is to start creating the job description. We researched similar position job descriptions looked like we used job posting boards, local connections, found a number of examples, compiled a master list of education experience requirements, as well as key job responsibilities. We looked at positions not only within the state of Arizona, but also in California and Texas and in the Midwest. We also brainstormed to identify gaps within the city, room for growth opportunities, and cross-reference with existing positions. The title we have, Environmental Sustainability Program Manager. You're familiar with some of those positions. We have a program manager is a broad class of positions that we use for people that manage programs. So Anthony Floyd is a green building program manager. And we have other positions across the organization like that. Typically, they're non-supervising managers really focused on projects. In this building, we have the diversity and inclusion program manager who runs the diversity and inclusion program for the city. And we have a number of other positions like that as well. So that helped us develop the essential functions and the responsibilities of the new position to ensure that we're supplementing existing talents that we have within the organization, so not to duplicate those, but to capitalize on the potential. So after that was developed by staff, I got a chance to review it. Human Resources got a chance to review it. Earlier this month, we met with our Sustainable Scottsdale steering team of staff. They reviewed the job description, gave us feedback, really talked a lot about how this particular position would interface with staff in other departments like the water policy advisor that you've been talking with tonight and different positions, the energy contract coordinator and facilities and the other staff that are within the environmental initiatives office and planning. And we took all that input in, and that's the draft that we have for you today. Next slide, key qualifications from an education experience standpoint. A bachelor's degree is required, master's preferred. This can all be in related fields, but we did go to the Arizona State University Sustainable Solutions School and looked at all the degrees they offered and made sure all those degrees were included there. We're looking for someone that has a minimum of 5 years of professional and environmental management experience. That's next slide. This is the overview of the purpose and responsibilities of the position. As you can see there, we're looking for someone that has a wide variety of environmental sustainability experience, manage a wide variety of programs, ones that, we don't have people in place today. So not covering the environmental compliance, not covering the environmental building or architecture disciplines that we have, not covering energy management specifically, not covering any of the water fields, but someone that's broadly prepared to do that. And the big piece of that is the focus on public policy development and employee and community involvement, education and communication. That person is going to be the key spokesperson from staff on environmental sustainability issues from the city. So one more slide and then I'll cut it there and listen to your feedback. You can see here a number of the essential duties and responsibilities. So advising on the development and implementation of environmental sustainability strategies, collaborating and coordinating with other city departments on environmental initiatives. This person will become the staff representative for the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission. You'll be able to applaud Tim for his long service in that role, and then he can take a role similar to Anthony at that point, focused on his specific areas. And then we'll represent city with external program partners and assisting coordination with the community residents. So this will, while we have staff that will continue to interface with experts in other cities and regionally on specific issues, Tim will continue to do that in the kind of the broader environmental sustainability role. So the people that are interfacing with the key staff in Tempe and Phoenix in particular, this will be our key person for that. So we've put this together. We're ready to go out and start recruiting this position. So we have someone in place early in the summer, but because this position will so closely work with you all, and because this position is in large part due to recommendation made some time ago by the commission, we want to make sure and get your input on it. So.
Thank you so much, Brent. I have some nasty feedback. I have a real quick question. Who will this person report to?
Thank you. Chair and members of the commission, this position is going to report to Aaron Perot, who is the planning area director for long range planning. And Aaron, you of course work very closely with on the general plan. Much of the general plan is related to environmental sustainability, as you know, because you all have provided input on that, and is focused on the long range efforts of the city. And we feel that it's critical that this person also be in that area because we're talking about long range efforts of the city, things that we want to move forward. Also in that area are, she also has code enforcement reporting to her. So there's some environmental components associated with that. Also historic preservation program is reporting to Aaron as well. So that's about how we take the resources of the past and preserve them into the future. So we thought that there's a lot of good complementary skill set. And of course, the Environmental Initiatives Office is already reporting to her. So we thought that was a good fit in terms of that.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? First, we'll go with Walter.
I think it's a great step to finally be heading in the direction of having a dedicated staff to kind of oversee. I guess I would also ask, I don't know, Aaron, I was just looking up on the website. Who does she report into then?
Sure. Aaron Perot reports to Randy Grant, who is, as you know,
Director
the
of-
former environmental lead for the city and
Yeah.
is the planning, economic development, and tourism director. And Randy reports to me.
Okay.
So I'm going to continue to be very involved and continue to be the executive champion of our environmental sustainability effort, but I'll have a full-time person that can help me with that. So.
And then I'm just trying to do the comparison. So Brendan Kay is a director level at Tempe, right? And I think, and I forget the gentleman names at Phoenix, is also at a director level as well. I guess my initial response is we're showing up late to the party and then we're giving the person a lesser title. And my guess is Brendan isn't 3 levels removed from the assistant city or 4 levels removed or 5, from the mayor, right? I mean, it'd be interesting. I just think that we've undershot the, I think we came late to the party and we're undershooting based on Tempe and Phoenix, who, will you get Brendan to apply for a program manager? I don't think so. That's my only assumption or comment. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. You have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And again, my Wi-Fi is pretty sketchy, so if I break up, just chime in here. First of all, Brent, congratulations on this job. I'm delighted that it's being created, and I think the other commissioners are as well. I'm especially happy to see on this slide that's on the screen, on the third bullet, that it talks about multiple disciplines because, just full disclosure, I work at the School of Sustainability at ASU, and sustainability is about crossing disciplines and meshing disciplines. So it's good to see that. And just in that same vein, you're going to title the job what you need to title it. The word environmental sustainability, just to provide a very short lesson on the sustainability concept, which, ASU has the first sustainability degree, created the first sustainability degrees in the country. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You have me? Okay.
We can hear you.
Thanks. So I was just going to say the word environmental sustainability is a little bit redundant. Sustainability is often presented as a three-legged stool with environmental considerations, economic considerations, and social considerations. So it's a bit redundant. The other thing I'll mention when you talked about qualifications, ASU does have undergraduate degrees in sustainability. So I appreciate the fact that you're aiming for a master's level person, but it'd be great if you could include in that list of desired qualifications, undergraduate degree in sustainability, because they do exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Tammy, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Chrisman Lazar. Well, I guess somewhat like Walter was saying, I think we were all aiming for a higher level position. Super happy to see this happening. Don't want in any way to be complaining, because it's so exciting to be moving in this direction. But I do think that, or at least I certainly, and from the conversations we had in many meetings, we're looking at a higher level position. And I just like to get a little bit more clear. So how does the Office of Environmental Initiatives interact with this new position, and how much flexibility does this position have to really work across sectors with the different departments? I mean, you've got a lot of them mentioned in here, but in a practical way, are they fairly free to have a lot of interaction that's positive amongst the different departments when they're developing policies and working with us on a lot of the different initiatives that we've been talking about over the years?
Thank you, Tammy. Brent, do you want to go ahead and respond to that?
Sure. So I did want to clarify, this position will be the chief sustainability position within the city. It is the highest ranking position in this field in the city, and we did that deliberately. So it is at levels above any of the other staff, and we did that deliberately. We did look at the other structures, and we were trying to find something that works well for us and is similar to how we're handling other similar things. They are going to be the staff person for this commission. They are going to be the leader of the Sustainable Scottsdale steering team. All of the people that they'll be working with have had input into the job description so that they understand that we're designing this the right way so that they'll coordinate that. So I think we've tried to address all those issues. Certainly in some of the other cities, what you have is you'll have someone like Brian Biesmeyer listed as the environmental, the chief sustainability officer, or someone like Dave Bennett, who's our solid waste director. Those are certainly models that you'll see present elsewhere in the East Valley. We have a relatively small city manager's office, so we feel this structure will work well. I do know in talking to the other cities, there's stuff that we do that they wish they had as well. So we're starting here, and if we need to do something different in the future, or if we don't get the person that we're recruiting that we think would do the best job for this, we'll take a look at it differently. I hope I did answer that question. They're going to work with everybody. I'm going to help ensure that.
Thank you for that. Steve, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I do. First of all, thank you, Brent, for coming together on this particular topic, which you know is very near and dear to my heart. Question I have is related to the educational requirements, and Ryan raised a point that is a concern of mine, and not because I don't think it's a good idea, but the real issue in my mind is, has this technology been around long enough for someone to have 5 years worth of experience in doing it? You know, I would hate to see us unable to find someone because we're, you know, it's like asking someone to have 10 years of experience in cloud computing, except cloud computing is only 6 years old. And so you'll never find someone. So I'm just wondering if we should continue to maintain that 5 years experience or just change it to relevant experience and see what happens. I mean, if you find someone with a master's degree, wonderful. If you find someone who has, you know, an excessive amount of experience, terrific. But, you know, if we set a threshold that says minimum of 5, we may close the door to people who will do an excellent job. Because we're scoping the job that didn't exist 5 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think Ryan would like to respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. We've been granting sustainability degrees at ASU since, I believe, 2007. Master's degrees maybe a year or two after that, and then our first PhD in 2010 or 2011. So that's at least 10 years that we've been granting degrees now. I'm happy to say that a lot of other colleges and universities around the country have been playing catch up. But I mean, if I could have my dream come true, this would be filled by an ASU grad from the School of Sustainability, but I'm extremely biased in that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Brent, you had a comment?
Yeah, Chair, I had a comment, but I also have a follow-up for Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Johnson, I just want to clarify on your comment earlier. Do you think it would be sufficient to just call this the Sustainability Program Manager? Was that your comment?
Yes, I mean, I've seen other cities and organizations add the word environmental or put another word in front of it, but the way we teach sustainability, as I said, at the school is it's essentially a three-legged stool that balances environmental, economic, and social concerns. And the third bullet on the slide, you know, demonstrates the cross-disciplinarity and the transdisciplinarity of what the position is. So long story short, I think the position could simply be called sustainability.
Thank you. And there was another.
I think we're good. I have one comment. The only other portion of the job description that I would add would be something to do with grants. Somebody who has demonstrated grant writing experience and that actually being included as part of duties. We have heard from multiple others that have come and talked to us about this position that there is a lot of potential for applying for grants and for funding various different programs. So I think that this will be a big portion of what they can help us with in terms of Scottsdale.
Great.
I assume that there's a salary range associated with the program manager role. What's that range?
Yeah, sure. The salary range is on the job description we provided. It's 87,172 to 126,776.
Okay, so yeah, you don't need maybe you don't need a director title, huh? That's a decent salary, so that's good.
That's certainly what we thought. And if I could clarify the comment on the education experience, there is an equivalency allowed. So if someone is very highly qualified and to Commissioner Schlosser's point, has the experience to be able to do it, but has it in a different area, and they can make the case for that through the recruitment process, that would be okay. But I do think the 5 is not going to be a problem. And also, if you have the preferred masters, the 2 years of the master's program is also an equivalency for the experience. So you could have someone that has 3 years of environmental sustainability experience and a master's degree, and that would qualify. So thank you.
Thank you. We have Ryan has his hand up.
Yeah, just one last, Natalie, you triggered this for me because your comment was really well taken. Brent, I would love to see some language similar to what was in the job description for the energy efficiency manager, because I do think in addition to grants, this position could and should pay for itself, maybe even be net positive in terms of revenue to the city with some of the activities, efficiencies, grants that this person can bring in. So Natalie, I think is a terrific point. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are good. Thank you so much, Brent, for sharing that with us. Our next item on our agenda is the recommendation letter of support regarding the various different codes, the International Green Construction Code, the International Energy Conservation Code. We sent out a letter that Mr. Anthony Floyd prepared with our own Walter Kukulik. They worked on this letter. We presented this letter last meeting, and in that time period, we discussed maybe some additional changes to that. That was sent out to everyone before the meeting. I also want to acknowledge that some of the things that have been discussed are associated with public comment. So we've had 2 different separate instances of public comment. The first one was before last meeting. There were some recommendations, particularly associated with some plumbing code, and I think Anthony was going to have a little bit of discussion relevant to those comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Crispin Lazar. Sam, can you pull up the public comment? Yeah, and just go to the table, the next page, the top of the next page. I guess it's the 3rd page. Yeah, there's a table. Yeah, right there. Okay. Yeah, so there were 3 comments actually associated with this overall comment, and it's related to water bottle filling stations, private lavatory faucets, and shower heads. We're proposing for the first one, water bottle filling stations, that 50% of the water fountains would be equipped for water bottle filling. And in this table, you will see, I guess it's 3 columns from the right, is the International Green Construction Code. That's what we're adopting. That's consistent with the ASHRAE 189 standard. And there's not anything in here. WaterSense doesn't really address this. I just want to give a little background, explain how this works, particularly with the plumbing code, because we're adopting language that's in the International Green Construction Code, but we're also proposing to amend the plumbing code so there's not a contradiction between the plumbing code and the Green Construction Code. So in the plumbing code, there's a table for minimum plumbing facilities. And for water fountains, it's based upon the occupancy classification. So for instance, an assembly that's a nightclub, there's a requirement for 1 water fountain per 500 people based upon the square footage of the area and the number of occupants. And it's similar for restaurants and for theaters. And so the code just goes on for assembly, businesses, institutional, and there's different ratios, 1 per 500, 1 per 100. And so once that's determined, the number of fountains, water fountains that are required, our proposal is then to require at least half of those have water bottle filling stations, or the capability, or a separate water bottle filling station next to the water fountain. So that's some clarification on that. I believe the comment, well, I know the comment was actually proposing to raise that 50% to a higher number because of our hot, dry climate and the drought conditions. This number comes from a national standard. I'm actually a member of the ASHRAE 189.1 committee and the International Green Construction Code Committee. And that's where the number came about through the vetting of the industry and the committee and the voting. And so that's the number I'm proposing for the code adoption. The second item in this table is the private lavatory faucet. And that is related to basically bathroom lavatory faucets. And we're proposing 1.5 gallons per minute comes from the WaterSense program, which is a nationally tested standard with industry input. Because normally without that number or the unamended number would actually be 2.2 gallons. So we're lowering it from what's in the plumbing code, that's 2.2 now, and we're lowering it down to 1.5. And once again, that comes from the WaterSense program. It's also consistent with the ASHRAE 189.1 and also the International Green Construction Code. So that's where we're getting that number. Some states are using different numbers and lower numbers, but we wanted to stick with the standard. And another point I will make is that we're creating a new minimum, a new code minimum. The baseline minimum right now is a higher number, and we're lowering the number. So we're creating a new minimum. So in a sense, you could say it's above code. It depends on how you want to describe it. There's more than one way of looking at this. You can say it's above code, or that we're just making a new baseline minimum. And so that's where that number comes from, the 1.5. And then finally, the shower head is 2.0. We actually amended the plumbing code 4 years ago when we adopted the 2015 Green Construction Code. And in the plumbing code, we adopted it at 2.0. The unamended code says 2.5. So that's what most cities are using, 2.5. We lowered it to 2.0 5 years ago, and we're proposing to keep it at that number. This number comes from WaterSense. Once again, the national WaterSense is a part of EPA, and they involve the industry, the plumbing industry, in setting standards. And they run tests to ensure that there's enough water coverage over the body, and that you really don't feel the difference between a 2.5 and a 2.0. And so it's a well-recognized number, and that's why we were proposing it. That's also consistent with ASHRAE 189.1 and IATMO. But you see over the last two columns that there's some other numbers from other areas around the country. California, they're pushing the numbers even lower. And as well as in New York and California, they're going for 100% water bottle filling stations. So that's where the numbers come from, and this is what the public comment is all about. And as I indicated, I propose to go with the national standard.
Thanks for that, Anthony. Do we have any other comments out on the hands up? Sam? Tony has a comment before we see that. Go ahead.
Anthony, just a question. Why, I heard your logic on the numbers you have for the private lavatory faucets and shower heads, but why not go lower? Why not go better? Kind of like with my comment before to the water folks. I don't want to say we're late to the party, but it seems like we could do better. Is there a reason why we're not doing more? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I actually, as a part of a coalition, proposed at the national level that we move to the 2.0 shower head, because it's still 2.5 nationally. And for some reason, the industry, well, I know some of the reasons, and it's related to dry drain is what they call it, and that there needs to be more sufficient tests to ensure that there's enough water to move the waste down the line, including the public sewers. They're saying that if everyone goes to these lower numbers from 2.5 to 2.0 and even below 2.0, that there could be significant issues with the infrastructure for sewage drainage. That's some of the argument. So I feel safe going 2.0 because there's been a lot of tests and many other cities have adopted 2.0. There's a less amount of cities that adopted 1.8. So there's less, I guess, history with that. So that's essentially why I'm proposing 2.0.
Thanks for that, Anthony. Tammy, you have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. I guess just after hearing the water presentation, it seems like we're not the national standard and we're in the desert. So it just seems like maybe we go beyond the national standards on things. And as you said, we are on the shower head, looks like. But I know we had a lot of discussions about water bottle fillers in the past. And of all of these, if we could increase the water bottle filler, because most people here, as you said, do have their water bottles with them. So often people do, and to have the opportunity to refill that would reduce our number of plastic bottles out there, which we've talked about several times in years past, as well as reducing, our water use. It just seems like a smart thing to consider, maybe reconsider. I would love to see us go as aggressive as we can on everything, but if there's one particular one here, the water bottle filler, I would ask if we maybe could revisit that again. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bossi. In terms of the national standard, what I'm referring to is a national green building standard, because the national standard, the numbers are higher than what's here.
2.5, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really referring to a national green building standard. And you do make a point, we're in the desert, maybe 100%, 50, 70%, but I don't know what that number is. California is the leader in all of this, and they're pushing their numbers lower. And I'm not aware of any issues to date that they're having. But the majority of jurisdictions are using the national green building standard numbers.
What is our current water bottle filling station requirement for new development?
It's 0.
Yep.
There's no requirement currently for water bottle fulfilling stations.
This is
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schlosser. I want to, because it's hard for people to see a hand raised. I want to support Commissioner Bossi's position on the water filling stations. I know in a location where I routinely go, they changed the water fountain to a water filling station. And one of the little notes on the station is the number of plastic bottles that have not been used because, this is a bottle filling station. And I agree that this is something where we don't have to match the national standard, because bringing water with you is just a natural habit of just about everybody in Arizona. And so I think having, in new construction or in repairs of existing construction, that saying, the water fountain should be a water bottle filling station, I don't think is doing anything dramatically different. I understand Anthony's concern about infrastructure and the fact that as you lower lavatory volumes and shower head volumes, you run the risk of losing sufficient, waste flow to move waste down into the system. And it may be that our current infrastructure can handle it, but until we have someone like Brian Biesmeyer do an analysis and say, yes, if we went to low flow shower heads and much lower flow toilets, we'd be fine. That's a piece of the equation that needs to be answered by a professional. But I think the water bottle filling station, that's just what we want to do. And I think that going to, maybe if you're not comfortable going to 100%, but let me say this, if you went to 75%, pretty soon everybody would be putting in water bottle filling stations in place of water fountains, simply because the number of water fountains available to purchase or install will go down, the price of them will go up. And the higher volume of the water bottle filling station will lower the cost of that, and people will move in this direction from an economic perspective. So I support Commissioner Bossi's position on the water bottling filling station, going from the green building code of 50% to, if not the California, New York standard of 100%, something substantially higher than 50. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We had one more comment here from Walter.
Yeah, I would just support that. I mean, so if you look at the purchasing guy that's buying these things, right? So there's a guy that works for the big construction company in purchasing. They don't want to buy two different sets of drinking fountain dispensers. They just want to buy one, and they want to negotiate the best deal on whether it has bottle dispensers or not. So I would either say 0 or 100 is the best solution. And I think 100 is the best solution. 50 just makes it more complicated. That's an example of complicating the code to nobody's benefit. So that's my idea of doing 100%. And then that allows them to go, as Steve mentioned, go out and buy in bulk the water bottle, the best product out there, right? So if we think water bottle dispensers are the best one, then go, allow them to buy it in bulk. So that's what I think the industry would prefer 100%.
Thanks for that. We do have, and I'm trying to make certain that we get to the rest of the agenda, but we have a letter currently. It was revised to include some additional text that says, hey, we applaud the codes, but we do want to challenge the city to go further. So that's where it's at right at the moment. We have the option right at the moment of going ahead and approving this letter or revising this letter. And so what I need to have is some consensus from y'all in terms of what our next action should be.
Commissioner Lazar, just on the second page, if you wanted to change a number, then it would be on the second page of the recommendation. So Sam, if you could go to the second page. Yeah, it's right under high efficiency plumbing fixtures. Right under
Yes,
that
we see
is
it.
the water bottle filling stations, and 50% is right there. So that's the only thing that would need to change.
So if we wanted to go ahead and make a change to recommend 100%, is that where I'm hearing people would like to consider?
I will just throw out a motion to get things started. This is Commissioner Bossi. I recommend that, I make a motion that we approve this letter with the one change that the water bottle filling stations go from 50 to 100%.
Do I have a second?
I second that motion. This is Commissioner Schlosser.
Great. We have a motion to approve the letter as written with the exception of increasing the percentage of drinking fountains with water bottle filling stations from 50 to 100%. Can I go ahead and get a roll call for the vote?
Certainly. Chair Lazar, Chair Chrisman Lazar.
Approved.
Vice Chair Coletta.
I just have one question. I'm sorry, before the vote.
Okay.
Item number 1 under that same category talks about the flow rates Is that to go with the one in line with the ones that Anthony is recommending?
Correct.
I vote negative.
Okay. Let's see. Commission member David Abranovich,
I approve.
Commission member Bassi,
I approve.
Commission member Kukulik, Commission member Johnson,
Aye.
and Commission member Schlosser.
I approve.
The motion passes 6-1.
Thanks for that.
And maybe Commissioner, if you want to maybe voice your reasoning, just so it's clear. I think I know why, but make sure it's clear your reasoning for the.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Kukovic. Until I have engineering data in front of me that says my shower will not drain properly at 1.8%, we need to go all we can. As Commissioner Bossi said, we live in the desert here. We need to go with the lowest flow rates possible. That's why I voted negative. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Tony. I do believe that this is not a one-all solution right at the moment. I mean, right at the moment, there are other opportunities for us to lobby and to continue to champion this. And so I don't think that this is a done deal in terms of the only things that we're going to be doing. So I definitely want to encourage us all to champion things that we want to make certain that we put forward.
Excuse me,
The next,
Chair Lazar, just a quick thing. Could I ask, and I don't see Mr. Biesmeyer on, but could the chair send a note to Mr. Biesmeyer about any concerns that Scottsdale Water would have regarding the lower flow rates? Because we can always make an amendment to this letter, you know, in another meeting. But we need, and I think Commissioner Coletta highlighted the point, we really don't know about what the impact of going to the lower flow rates would be. And, you know, Brian Biesmeyer and his engineering staff will.
thanks for that. I will definitely reach out to the water department. I don't know that that will be in time for this particular letter. But I do think that we have the opportunity to, you're looking right at the moment at just the change in code, and it only affects people who are building new things right now. We also have the opportunity to work with the water group on all of the retrofits, those rebates that they have. Right now, the current code, it uses the Water Smart standard as what they get the rebate for, which is consistent with this code. If there is definitely some movement that we want to promote, it would be a great opportunity to study and to evaluate the impacts if we work with the water department to see whether or not they would be open to decreasing that rebate, that value for the rebate when you actually retrofit your home.
Chair Chrisman Lazar.
Yes.
I just want to let you know that I did share these proposed amendments with the Water Department, Water Resources Department, with Gretchen and other water conservation staff. So they have the water sense numbers, and so they are in support of that, but they haven't seen any lower numbers than that. So it is something that they could consider.
Thanks for that. Tammy, you have your hand up?
Just real quick. Thank you. I do very much support what Commissioner Coletta is saying. I was more reading the tea leaves and trying to get things moving, but in my heart of hearts, I would prefer to have I would prefer to support what he is saying about going for it and trying to go with those lower numbers. Thank you.
Thanks for that. The next item on our agenda is item 6. It has to do with bees. At the end of our last meeting, Commissioner Johnson identified an issue that he had personally with some bees, and his reaction when he was told that they come out and they kill them whenever they come in and you call a beekeeper. So he definitely was very concerned about that, and he wanted to make certain that we knew personally that there are other options. In response, we placed that item on our agenda for this particular meeting. I personally think that this topic fits well into our public outreach efforts, and we could utilize it as basically a test case in how we approach public education. So I definitely want to, in this agenda item, discuss ways that we can educate our residents and city operations about pollinator conservation, and basically give an update on some of the activities that have happened between last meeting and this meeting. So I just wanted to, and at the end of the day, really kind of brainstorm what we want to do in terms of an action. So those are the two things: basically update progress and then brainstorm on next steps. So I wanted to acknowledge some of the work that has been done since the last meeting. Ryan has reached out to Council Member Solange Whitehead. He may want to give us his own update, but if I missed something here, but my understanding is, there's some information on the city's website especially in the fire department's webpage, that is a little bit aggressive associated with bees. And so he reached out to her about how we convey that information and trying to soften that language, and also to provide some no-kill bee relocation service resources. And so that's one thing that has been done. Steve's also been working very hard to identify some technical experts. He reached out to the University of Arizona's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and he has identified Dr. Shaku Nair, who is an expert in this very subject, and she has been the source of the article that we distributed. And I don't know if anyone got a chance to read that, but it really does have a lot of useful information that is targeted in city environments on how we can help protect pollinators and specifically bees. And then in terms of work that I did reach out to the Desert Botanical Garden. I identified Dr. Kim Pegram. She is in charge of their pollinators group, and she's also amenable to helping out. And I reached out to our APS people that are doing some useful work in terms of pollinator landscaping to help promote pollinators in our substations. So that's kind of a lot of the different stuff that has happened since our last meeting. We also have identified a few different ideas, not just people have emailed me different things. Steve has identified some different things, and so has Ryan. So we've talked about possible things that we could do, basically an article that we could write for our residents and posting it to Sustainable Scottsdale, along with providing some potential static resources on the webpage that would have additional information that would always stay there, but like a highlight article that happens once, and then again, those static resources. We also talked about possibly a utility bill insert that would provide that article on protecting bees and pollinators. Ryan also identified we could maybe bring this up to the Scottsdale Independent for a separate thing. That would not necessarily be something that the city of Scottsdale would be involved in, but we could definitely as a board kind of share that with the Independent. Some of the things that Steve has brought up are associated with developing resource information for city first responders and Parks and Rec. So we have some folks that do have to address issues when they encounter bees in the city. Also resource information that could be shared with the City of Scottsdale schools, not necessarily City of Scottsdale, but Scottsdale area schools to educate children in terms of pollinators and bees. We also talked about possibly webinars that could be could occur, and or adding this to the existing Scottsdale gardening series that do occur. And we talked about even having an event to celebrate pollinators and educate residents and homeowners associations. So those are some of the things that have already been put out. I just wanted to identify those so that we could kind of get to a next course of action pretty quickly. So if anyone has, I guess, strong feelings on what next steps should be, I'd like to hear from you.
Chair, can I add one more thing?
Sure.
It was before this issue came up, I was notified by Rachel Smetana with the mayor's office that he had signed the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, which is an international pledge on creating better environments for the monarchs to make their migrations and do their pollinating along the way. So just something to know.
Thanks for that. Has that already been highlighted on Sustainable Scottsdale?
I don't know if it has. I'll take a look. I had to go out and do some other research to find out about the policy itself. And so I'll speak with Rachel and see if she wants to do something about that to highlight it for the mayor. I know he's had to do a proclamation. There's some other steps that they have to do, or at least take. Some of them are educational about planting, how you plant different plants for the milkweed and things like that to draw the butterflies on their trip. So
I definitely would see that this would coordinate with that. And I think not necessarily having separate messages, but having a message that includes that proclamation as an additional build on a message would be my vote. But I didn't know if anybody else had anything. I do see somebody's hand raised. Tammy.
Yes, I think that, thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. I think that we, in the spirit of what you were saying about some of these different ideas, certainly having a separate pledge for the bees would be a very positive thing. And I just propose something as strong as bees die, we die. No, we don't, or maybe we flip that on its head in the opposite. But I mean, I think it's like people, that realization that this is pretty crucial. Like our food source is non-existent without bees, pretty much. So anyway, I think that a proclamation, a goal to have a proclamation for the bees, highlighting just the bees would be a wonderful goal to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
The staff member, Sam. One thing I think we want to be clear about the mission. I understood because in reading all the literature that's been coming in, it's kind of a conundrum on how to promote bee habitat and how not to attract bees because of the potential for bee swarms and attacks and things like that. So it ranges across the full spectrum. But I go back to the original intent of Commissioner Johnson's concern about promoting a no-kill practices that are just clearly that it's an alternative for spraying dead a bee swarm in a public place at a bus stop or something, which does pose a threat. But if the commission could focus on, say, what the original intent was, a no kill options, that narrows it down to a manageable thing. But in all the pollinator literature, you get so much information, so many options of promoting, say, bees or discouraging bees. Where are we going with that, in terms of attractants or the opposite of that. But I was very strongly influenced by Commissioner Johnson's original concern on no-kill options. That's very clearly defined and focusable. Thank you.
Thanks. Steve, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I want to second what Sam has said. I think that our initial response would be something that is somewhat internal and a communication that's external. The internal communication would be for city resources to have options and alternatives that they can quickly go to when there are bee swarms. And the external thing would be perhaps a bee alert number to use a funny kind of a term, so that citizens, if they saw a swarm or were concerned about large numbers of bees, would have a 911 alternative to dial, where someone would then be able to take action. I think one of the biggest challenge now is that the response goes to people who don't have information that effectively allows them to save the hive. They basically go out there with one purpose in mind, and that is public safety. So if we focused, as Sam said, on providing information to city agencies about how best to deal with bee swarms, and then simultaneously had public service announcements for the community about who first to call when you're facing a bee situation, that would, I think, address a lot of what Commissioner Johnson had raised. That was, I think, something he had raised. And if we get that piece of the equation squared away, then we could expand our vision to how do we encourage, bees. I mean, we have a Sonoran preserve that's 40% of our land. We should be able to put hives in that Sonoran preserve and be able to move swarms into those hives without causing any problems to any public communities. So just I support Sam's position.
Thanks for that, Steve. Tammy, you have something real quick?
Yes, real quick. Thank you. I think that very clearly, I like the fact that that's identifiable, as Sam has mentioned and Commissioner Schlosser has mentioned, and Mr. Johnson. But I think when you started talking about, Chair, when you started talking about the things that have happened, but since the last meeting and this one, that to me seemed like an initiative number 2, which was education, because a lot of the vast majority of people probably don't know why it's important to save the bees versus not, and they would just call a bee killer and wouldn't think anything about it. So I think there are 2 separate initiatives that are both very specifically definable. One would be the no kill resources, which is fantastic. Second would be education, why it's important. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I really need to go ahead and finish this item up. What I'm looking for is what we want to take on as our next action. Is our next action development of a short article for Sustainable Scottsdale? That, I mean, I don't want to get hung up on the content at this particular time, but we have resources. We've identified individuals that can help us put a message together that targets whatever that message is going to be. Is that our next course of action? Is it to develop a quick article that is educational in nature, that basically can help link to, I think, these other options, these no kill options? Is that our next course of action? Or do we want to focus on internal city resources? That would be my either or at this point.
Is it impossible for it to be both?
It is not impossible. I just want to make certain that this is something that everyone's supportive of, because we're going to devote resources to it.
Okay, well, I would be supportive of an article for Sustainable Scottsdale, and then something for internal resources, Parks and Rec, the fire department, and the public safety organizations, providing them with information that they can use to address bee swarms or, possible public exposure to bee swarms when the public calls in. So, the answer is yes.
Appreciate that. My only hesitance is I don't know what resources already exist for the city. And I think we do need to do our due diligence and reach out and understand what people are currently doing. Sam?
This is Sam. We could certainly start with Parks and Rec. They are on the front line with subcontractors as well as extension service personnel. I mean, they deal with the public on bees and swarms. And so they are definitely a starting point to resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, you have your hand up? Ryan Johnson, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, apologies. I missed part of the conversation because of Wi-Fi. I'll just throw one other thing out. I believe, I haven't done research on this, but I believe there are, Scottsdale is a USA tree community. I believe there's bee-friendly community designation as well. So that might be something to add to our list, that we might pursue that for Scottsdale. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I think that I will take an action item of reaching out to our community involvement specialist to understand the requirements associated with articles for Sustainable Scottsdale. Sam will take an action item of looking into city resources currently in terms of addressing bee swarms and how we help manage those activities for Parks and Rec. And if you could look into fire as well. I think that that was one of the items that Ryan mentioned too, in terms of resources. And then I don't know if you've already coordinated a bit. I missed Steve with our resources. Are you inclined to follow up with them if we have a little bit more parameters associated with what we need for an article?
Yes, I'm more than willing to do that.
Thank you so much. At this time, I think we will go ahead and continue so that we can go ahead and finish up. And then I think that this will probably be it'll be on the agenda for next meeting. Our next agenda item is staff updates. We have general updates with Tim.
I think I've sent out several different updates to you all in the month, so I'm not having anything specific that I want to provide updates on. Brent also mentioned to me that he felt he's briefed everyone on what the steering committee was about, so, and what they're up to now, which is working on the position as well as the sustainability plan. So
The only thing I would ask on that is, do we have any plans to have other representatives from the Sustainable Scottsdale steering team? Is that planned for the agendas up in the future for the rest of the year?
I will speak with Brent about that. I think that with the sustainability planning, we have that opportunity because we're negotiating the scope of work with ASU, and we're asking them to brief not only this group, but also to brief that group as well, the steering committee. ASU is asking us to have that be combined somehow. So we'd have to work out the logistics because obviously our staff meets at a different time than this group does, but we'll get through that.
Thanks for that. Anthony, do you have any updates for green building updates and webinars?
No, I have no updates at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The last item is review of anticipated items for the August commission agenda. Does anyone have any recommendations for our next agenda? I can't see if anybody has their hand up.
I have a question, Chair.
Yes,
Point of order, are you not having a July meeting?
I just was reading I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It says August. We will have a July meeting. Sorry.
Okay, very good.
Thank
Very
you. Thank you for clarifying. I was reading the agenda. I was getting ahead of myself. So Tammy, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Just real quick, Scottsdale 101 did an excellent presentation on sustainable Scottsdale on June 10th. It occurred to me that I wondered if we could repeat that for the commission possibly. It was a good overview.
The presentation has not yet been combined. When they had some problems, technically, they didn't turn on the recording until I was about halfway done with what I was working on. And then when I came in to do it the next day, it was like, I felt like they had to keep cutting me. So we'll see how that comes out. They're editing now.
Okay, well, maybe a new version of it or whatever you think's appropriate, but I thought the commission would enjoy hearing some of
Sure.
that information. It was excellent.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have some items for next meeting's agenda?
Chair, I will be bringing in the draft plan from the Urban Heat Island study for Scottsdale. And I'll be introducing that and making sure everybody gets copies of it as well.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
One of the things that I was going to offer as a potential item, Tammy and I were discussing after our last meeting when we talked about sustainable Scottsdale, the premise of having public outreach as a fixed agenda item, something that even if we don't discuss it at length, but to have it as something that we can go through and add any type of additional topics that we want to provide to our public information officer of topics that he might want to pursue for additional articles on sustainable Scottsdale. Could also just be an opportunity for us to brainstorm if we have other additional ideas. So I would like to propose that we have a public outreach on our agenda as a fixed item, if that's possible.
Do you want a motion for that, or do you just want to include it in the agenda for next month?
I was inquiring whether or not it can be a fixed item. But I think that what Sam is indicating is that we have to have a little bit more specifics associated with it.
Okay, well, I'm supportive of that topic as a standing item in the agenda. Should, staff approve the concept or provide, conditions for the concept to be involved. And I see Commissioner Bossy has her hand up, so I am going on mute.
Oh,
Tammy,
thank you. I would support that as well. I think just to elaborate, it seems like you had a great meeting with the public outreach officer, and they were talking about how so often they just would love to publicize more, but they needed more help. They could use some help with more content. So I think the easy low hanging fruit is, as we're out and about between months, we just think about things that would be interesting content that would be helpful to the city as they're trying to share, the good things that are happening and other things that would be positive for our public outreach related to sustainability. So I guess we would just come prepared to propose different possible subject matters. Obviously, it would go through the proper chain of whether or not it's appropriate or not. We would just bring our ideas, right? It's just sort of a way to remind us that we have that opportunity. I thought it was a great idea when you mentioned that. Thank you. I support it.
Just to give you an example, Sam, not that we can discuss specifics, but one of the things that we had discussed, my meeting with the public information officer was, hey, what if we had a sustainability academy? There's a water academy. Why can't we think about additional options like that? Or, is there a potential that maybe we could focus on a business that is doing something very useful? I was just talking with a friend who is with nationwide, and the new nationwide campus is LEED certified, and it would be really cool to be able to acknowledge some of the things that they're doing in an additional article. So those would be like things that we could recommend in a segment that we could do on a recurring basis if there are items that we think are useful in terms of public outreach. That would be examples of things that we could discuss.
Excuse me, Chair. This is Commissioner Schlosser. Just a quick follow-up on what you just said. If the nationwide building is LEED certified and they're doing interesting things in terms of environmental stewardship, we are going to be looking for the next winner of the Scottsdale Environmental Award. Maybe this is an organization that we should consider as a candidate.
It's a good point. Thank you. Anthony?
They are not LEED certified or even
Oh, they are
pursuing it.
not.
No,
That was bad information that I was receiving then.
yeah, they resisted.
They resisted. Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to find out more information.
Okay.
Okay, scratch them from the award.
It would be useful to follow up to understand, some of the things that are driving those types of decisions. So I definitely will follow up. Are there any other items that we would like to add to next month's agenda? Hearing none, does anyone want to go ahead and move to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. I'm going to second that. Thank you very much for your attention. It is 7:54. I think we are adjourned.
Thank you. Bye.